in the drill, it's going to be something like the city is reporting a boil water emergency, something that every hub would want to know about, but might not have through other means. And so by listening to the ACS and ham radio updates, we'll be able to get that news sooner. And so the theory is that somebody with a radio, probably not your radio operator, but it can be your radio operator, tunes to the ham frequency and listens for updates. During the drill, we'll have two different slots about a half hour apart. So you get two chances to listen to an update. And then that if it is like the city says, boil water, that's something that then should be passed in and end up on the message boards telling everybody that comes to the hub, we know something that you don't, boil water. And so the actual method we just saw there, where either you just press up arrow, before the drill, we will tell you what the repeater is. I just learned about 5 minutes ago what it will be. But we will have that as part of the packet, what repeater you tune into to listen for the updates. And then there'll be 2 time slots where you know somebody will be talking. And then you switch back to GMRS to do the rest of the drill. I can't see everybody without dropping out. So raise your hand or ask questions out loud if you have questions to stop me. Okay. Moving on. The other part you may have seen is our ICS 213 form. And I'm just going to hold one of them up here. Is that at all legible? I just wanted to make out that it has a form with a bunch of fields in it. And
I've got that on the slideshow.
Oh,
later
great.
on, Miles.
Great. We'll talk through ICS 213 as kind of a reminder about how they work. But part of it is when the radio operator is taking messages, they're going to be using these forms. And then they go out to all of the other stations saying, like, there's free ice at Miles's house, or whatever the announcement is in an emergency that would go onto a wants, needs, or any other board. Also, we're going to pass a few messages out of your hub, and we'll talk through the process for that and why we use a form for all the outbound messages to do that as well. And that segues into, we're going to use a radio net across the city. We're going to have one radio channel on a repeater that everybody tunes into. We're pretending that you're all in one neighborhood and can actually help each other. And so for the purposes of the drill, everyone's going to be in the rumble ready sector, and we can all talk to each other. It's like a movie where we're all just down the block from each other, West Seattle to Queen Anne. And so we'll practice using that net to send messages. Thank you. Perfect timing there, Anne. So one of the things, this is the top of an ICS form, and you can see there's like the mission, there's the to, which is going to be a hub. And so like hub manager at X, from hub manager at X, although we'll provide the name, and then a subject and the actual message. The part that everybody messes up is up there in red, and that's the message ID. And this matters when I send a message to Frank and say, Frank, do you have any ice? And he says, I don't know, let me check. And an hour later, he responds. And my radio operator needs to somehow figure out what this, yes, I've got ice is related to. So that message number is how we keep track of ongoing threads between or needs getting answered later and things like that. The format here is I think that format's a little different.
That's a bad example.
Okay, but I'll talk through what the format is going to be for us. The format for us is a little reverse, where it's the sector, which we're going to have as RR, and then a number you've probably only seen once before, which is 4 digits, which is the short name for your hub. The short name is in the Excel spreadsheet where you entered in your contact information. We will have a table of it handed out for everybody before the drill. But like, I'm part of North Capitol Hill, and ours is NCAP, NCAP. And so that's part of the message ID. And then the rest of it is just a up by one every message number, so you can keep track of how many you've sent and things like that. If you're using one of the Scratch, thank you, Ann. If you're using one of the sample forms that we got last year, it may even already have the message numbers filled in. And so you're just adding RR and then your hub short name to all of the forms. This is where people get confused because they'll make stuff up and then hand it to the radio operator, and the radio operator has to fix it. So it's probably best if like the radio assistant or somebody like that is the one that's filling in that area if you're starting from scratch. But that's been a frequent confusion point. Okay, and so here's the full form, like you're more likely to see it. The other thing I wanted to talk about is approved by. This is in our run books, this is the hub manager. They approve all messages that are outbound. And there's two reasons for that. One is you're only going to get a couple messages an hour. So there's a prioritization there. You want to make sure that your radio operator is only passing the highest priority messages. The other one is just part of any other message taker to make sure this is a high quality message, that it is as concise as possible, that it is asking for only the things we need without a lot of other updates. And so we will have sample messages, so you don't have to compose many messages. Maybe you'll compose one, maybe you won't. But once it is signed, in theory, the radio operator is just a sheet of glass. It's going directly from the signature to the next hop. They don't get to change anything. In practice, a radio operator might say, do you really want me to send the entire opening paragraph there, or can we make it more concise? You can go back and ask you to chop it down. If you have that, you need a new signature saying, yeah, this edit was good. And so in practice on our drills, that's been a real pain point where you get bad messages to the radio operator, and the radio operator really should send them back. And that just adds more confusion during the drill, as the hub manager is one more thing to do. Any questions here as we go? Frank?
Miles, sorry.
Frank's on mute. Frank, you're talking on mute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Bill, chip in if you've got something also. But on all of these, basically the 6 basic interrogatives, who, what, where, when, and how, and maybe not the why, but the basic stuff. And if you're going to write 2 or 3 sentences, write them each as a separate bullet on the space, the big space on the 213. So the people back and forth don't have to go through like they're going through a paragraph, like you're writing prose. Yeah, so thank you. So in section 7, the first sentence would be maybe 1 line. If it goes to 2 lines, make it 2 lines. For the second sentence, drop down and do the next one. If you have a third sentence, drop down. And yeah, it's just keep it short, but keep it easy to transmit, and also to edit if you need to. So that's
fabulous words, and we'll come back to an example of that in a little bit.
Okay.
Any other questions now before we go on?
Pat's got her hand up.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
Back to that number up in the corner where it was RR, and it'll be hyphen, and our hubs call letters, whatever. So we're using these non-numbered forms. So we should just maybe pre-number for our hub a half dozen of these forms, like just start with, something 3000, 3001 or something like that.
That would work great. Or you can just have the radio operator number them as they head out.
Okay.
So thanks for bringing that up, Pat. I want to point out all the hubs activating, all the hubs period should have gotten 2 Ziploc bags full of ICS forms. These are carbonless copies. So you keep a copy as the radio person. The other copy goes to the hub. So you're not having to write the message twice. You keep 1 copy, the other copy goes to the hub. I'm going to ask that folks use this version, the unnumbered version. These are for drills. The stuff with the big orange piece of paper says use in true emergencies only. These are the ones that are truly numbered ahead of time. We made a big purchase. They did not pre-number the first 10,000 we got. So that's what these are. And then we asked them to do it right. And so we got double double our money's worth. So we're asking folks to do the non-numbered, non-pre-numbered ones in this drill and save these for true emergencies. It should have, on top of your forms, it should have this 2-page numbering message form to explain what Miles is talking about with creating that message number at the top. So that's all I had, Miles.
We've kind of done this already. I
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
show like how to listen to the ham repeater, and it's basically you up arrow until you get to the name or the channel number that we will be sending in advance. But you just heard you can listen to ham radio pretty easily by changing the channel and then going back to GMRS repeater to talk to each other. Yeah, if you only have one radio, that's why we're going to space it out. So we're not expecting you to do 2 things at once.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can get you some more volunteers with more radios. At Homer Harris in
Exactly.
particular, I know we can send you some people from NCAP with their own radio. Yes, we should be able to do that.
Do either of the pages mention that you can type the channel number in?
Yeah, we demonstrated that just as you were joining.
Okay.
I don't think that's written down anywhere, but
Okay.
if
Because yeah, pressing the buttons is tedious.
Yeah,
It is.
tedious,
It is in the. I'm sorry. I have a Google Doc which
Oh,
will
it
be
is there,
shared
I
with you
see.
shortly, and in the Google Doc it says what the number is going to be for our drill.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So this is the GMRS cheat sheet that most of you should have. If you don't have, please let us know. This is this piece of paper is folded in half. This is the outside and this is the inside. So it tells you, like we were just talking about the Columbia repeater, 035 is the channel. So if you just knew Columbia, you would know how to get there by typing in 035 on your radio.
And for the drill, actually, if you go back one for the drill, we're probably going to be using one of the Capitol Hill ones. So you can look up on the day and say Capitol Hill 138. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll get it all out in advance.
Okay. Okay. So Miles, you're cool with this?
I think so. Given our success rate and given that the people who need their radios programmed will have it, we'll get that done at the same time.
Excellent.
Okay.
This is a little advanced. I'm going to take this off the screen till you're ready for it, Miles.
I think we may as well leave this on the screen and then I'll talk to it. This is a lot of jargon. This is something also that people on the radio or some people you will meet on the radio feel extremely strongly about this. For this drill, we'll all make mistakes. It's okay. That's why we have drills. And it's also one of those things where, like jazz, you're supposed to know the rules before you break them. Tonight, let's see if you could know all the rules, and then we'll accept that there's going to be some breaking of them. But these are advanced parts of a conversation. So I wanted to first back up and talk about we're going to use a message net or a directed net. That is like what we practice on Monday nights, but instead of 10 minutes, we're going to go on for 2 hours. And so we're going to do a bunch of things we never get around to on our Monday night nets. And the basic way the net is going to work is we open the net and you have everybody check in like we do on Monday. But then we find out who has traffic to talk about and what they want. And then the net control, this is a volunteer who's listening in and acting as operator, is going to determine who gets to talk when. And so the basic flow is like, we'll open the net, everyone will check in. I'll say, does anyone have priority traffic? Matt says, yes, priority traffic for the network. I wait, we get nobody else's priority traffic. I say, Matt, go ahead. Matt says, is it true they're giving out free ice cream? And we have that conversation. Or Matt talks to Bill and they talk. And then when they're done, they say net control, which is wake up net, back to net, which means we're done with our side conversation. Now we're going back to net control, and net control gets to pick who the next person is to talk. And then we repeat, where net control will poll for who has something to say right now at a given priority. And then net control says this person talk, that person talk, that person talk. And we just loop until the exercise is done. So the things you might want to do on the net are ask net control a question. Matt might say, net control, this is Matt. I have a question. And then he'd be quiet until net control would say, Matt, go ahead. And Matt would say, ask his question and go forward. So he might ask, like, has the city update gone out yet already? And I would say, no, that's going to be at 2 o'clock. And then we'd say, okay, any other questions for net control? Bill might say, I have a message for Eastlake. And so we'd wait and say, okay, Bill, go ahead with a message to Eastlake. Bill and Eastlake would talk. And at the end, Bill would say, net control, back to net, or returning to net. So does that basic flow make sense as far as like how the net's going to go in the parts that we haven't done most nights? Once again, raise your hand or speak out because I can't load everybody's picture at the same time. Okay.
I don't see any hands or anything, Miles.
Okay, great. So the big question there that I glossed over is what is priority traffic? And message priority depends on the emergency. And this is one of those things that kind of confused our hub a lot to begin with. Like, what are the things that are worth putting on the radio net? And for this drill, the highest priority is called real world emergency. And if you use the word real world emergency, everybody goes quiet except for the person. And we call 911 and it's for real. In drill world, we're calling priority traffic something that is a big enough problem that's going to affect multiple hubs. Did I drop off Zoom?
No? You're
No,
good.
you're
Okay,
still
good.
here.
Okay, cool. All the images
We're just-
froze.
Yeah, we're just lost in your
Rapture.
storage.
Thought.
Yeah.
Rapture. Yeah.
So priority traffic affects multiple hubs in this exercise. And so if it's like a wide area fire or something like that, maybe it'd be priority traffic. The next lower priority is if the city EOC asked you a question of the hub. We're not going to do that in the drill, but we're just putting it in there just to give everyone an idea of like the decreasing priorities. And the last one is everybody else that's hub talking to hub or communications within a hub. So when the net control says, did anyone have priority traffic, it would have to be something that's bigger than a hub that would break in above everybody else. So far, so good? Okay.
There's mud.
If we're good there, I'm going to go back over kind of standard operating procedure. Some of this you've probably done, which is that when you're going to check into the network, what you're going to do is you're going to press the transmit button, pause for a second, say this is, release your transmit, and listen and see if somebody else is talking at the same time. And the goal is to spend as little of time as possible with two people talking on the radio because then nobody can hear. If no one's talking, you press transmit again, you pause, and you say your call sign and then your hub tactical sign if this is the first time you're coming on, and any other details that the net control asked you for. So this is a good segue into tactical signs or pro signs. And this is just something memorable so we can say Eastlake instead of having to remember Ann's call sign. And so for this drill, most of the time we're going to be saying like hub to hub, but you still have to give your personal call sign every 10 minutes or when you're ending a conversation and might not be back. We have, where we know them, I've written down the tactical sign that various hubs have used. The only thing is you have to be consistent throughout the whole drill and that it has to be short and as few syllables as is still clear. So NCAP is pretty good. Eastlake is pretty good. Brayburn's pretty good. But if you have a really long hub name, we're going to ask for some help to figure out a good name. ideally, I'd like to write those down in advance if you happen to know them or have used them before.
And Miles, up on the screen is a cheat sheet
Yeah,
that we'll distribute before the drill. So you'll know per hub what your radio designator is, what your tactical call sign is. So like the normal name of the hub. And then we'll have this filled in. We
This
want
is
you to
great.
go to repeater channel blank at this time and this time to listen in on ham radio transmissions. Miles is going to get to this super important stuff. And then all those fancy words so that you sound like you know what you're doing on the radio will be listed down here.
Yeah,
So we will send that out. So this is your cheat sheet.
this is great. Thank you, Ann.
Mhm.
So that's the whole tactical call sign, or so help me if we come up with fancy names. One of the things that comes up every drill is that people at the radio station wish they could hear better, and everyone else wishes that the radio wasn't so loud. So if you can, the radios have a little headset adapter on the side that you can put in a cheap, like old iPhone connector or something like that. And it will let you hear in mono. The radios also usually come with a little hard plastic headphone. And I'll talk to Ann about sending out a link so you can buy some adapters to plug in normal headsets as well. But like a pair of construction headphones with an earbud underneath it is a cheap and easy way to get a little more privacy and hearing as a radio operator. This, okay. The other overwhelming thing, and this will come up for MTS and everybody else, is that everybody thinks that you are talking too fast. When you go on the radio, just assume everyone thinks you're talking too fast. They would like you to be slower. They would like you to speak slowly. Like Bill was saying, like after every sentence, they'd like you to pause to let them catch up with their writing. They would like you to give them a little time between when you press the transmit button and when you start talking. This is why I like being polite on the air, because all those please and thank yous gives you a little bit of pause between transmit and when the important stuff comes. And also pause before, when the net control asks you to do something, a little pause before you hit transmit, just in case somebody else even more urgent needs to race in before you. So lots of little pauses, like 2-3 seconds, is enough to make the whole thing much more comfortable for everybody. And yes, I see Steve's comment on NTS. They are some of the people that care a lot about form, and they're very good at using it. So yeah, that's a fine thing to copy from. It would be pretty cool to be at that level. So I wanted to talk through how we'll pass a message back and forth, just so that everyone's heard that process. And so it starts with, I'm going to send a message to Matt. And so I have asked Net Control, this is Miles, I have a message for Matt. Net Control talks to some other people, then he says, Miles, go ahead with message to Matt. I say, hey you, it's me. Calling Matt, this is Miles with a message. Then I wait for Matt to go ahead and say, Miles, go ahead. He's got his pen, he's ready, it's now good to go. And until then, I don't talk, because otherwise we'd just be wasting time. I'd say message begins, and then I'd go through each level of the form. I'd say from, to, my message number is EAC125. And then I may say break. Break means I'm taking a break to give you time to catch up. I may lift up on my transmit key to wait a second or two, see if anybody else needs to break in. Just a little heartbeat to let things move on. Don't be talking faster than they can write is the number one thing. And then Matt may respond back, and he may say, please say again everything after EAC. And so I'd say that was 125, break. And then Matt can say, Roger, that's one of those complicated words that means I've received everything. Or he'd say message received if he can't remember that. He'd say go ahead, meaning Miles can now just start feeding him more information. So I say, message continues, can I borrow $20? End of message. And so that's actually an important thing to remember when you're talking, is that you're done and the other person can't see what you're doing. They need to know that you're done. And so you say end of message when you've reached that end of message. And the last thing I would say is over, which means over to you, and has the implication of I want the other person to reply back to me as soon as possible so that I'm not here waiting and so that we can go on with our net. So I would say over. And then Matt might say something like, please wait. And he'd finish writing things down. And then he would say, confirm. Can I borrow $20 over? Or he might say, please repeat the last dollar amount, or whatever it takes to clean up the message where we are. And then Matt might say over to give it back to me. And then I'd say, okay, that's correct. Thank you, Matt. Net control, returning to net. So we have just done one message back and forth where I read the preamble, I paused, I let Matt check back with me that everything was going through. Matt clarified whatever he felt. When he wanted to be snappy, he could say Roger and then go ahead. And we continue that until we have that message done going back to net. Any?
Oh, Miles, you muted.
Okay, when
There,
did I
you're
drop?
back? You're still there.
Just a moment
You're
ago.
good. Yeah.
Okay.
Miles, I have your conversation available to put on the screen. I wonder if you and Matt could talk it through
I would
so
love to
people
do
can
that.
hear you go back and forth and see the words up on the screen.
Yep.
Matt,
Let's do
you
that.
good? You good to do that, Matt?
Sure, we can run through that.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. So I'm going to take the role of Station A. Station A, or Matt, this is Station A.
Station A, go ahead.
I have a message for you. Message begins from ABC to XYZ. Message number is EA-12 break.
Station A, I missed the last part of your transmission. Can you repeat?
Message number is EAC Echo Alpha Charlie -125 break.
Station A, are you still there? I've copied EAC 125.
Great. Confirm 125. The message continues. Can I borrow $20? End of message. Over.
Please wait.
Matt's continuing to write.
Confirm. Can I borrow $20 over?
That's correct. Station B. Net control. Returning to net. So we didn't do that perfectly, and you saw it still worked. And the key points are asking for fill in, like I missed this section. Would have been a little bit faster if Matt had said exactly what word he lost writing it down, so I didn't have to repeat the whole thing, but it worked fine.
I thought you were improvising the noise. Sorry.
I was. And I added a little bit more about where we were in the message, telling the person, like we're almost done with a message, or we're in the message body, things like that to help. I mean, they're filling in the form. We know what the form looks like. We can help out the person on the other end. Any other questions as we go through this?
Does the recipient always repeat the message? What if it's a long message?
Great question. If you know you've got it, that you can just say, Roger, please continue, or Roger, and handing it Roger over. If you know you've got it. If you want to confirm, I'll go over returning to net in just a minute. If you want to confirm things like you aren't sure or it's complex and so you want to read it back, that's what it's there for. And so confirm is good, fill after is good, Roger is good, depending on how up to speed you were. So the net is what we're talking about there is where you have the net control operator who says who gets to talk when. And when you're passing a message, you're in the state that the net control operator said Miles and Matt are allowed to talk right now. And no one else gets to talk on the channel until this is done. We give it back to net control, and net control says who gets to talk next. And so the bad thing would be if Matt and I just kept talking forever and then we walked away and turned off our radios and nobody knows what's going on. The net moves as quickly as possible when we finish our business and we say net control back to net. Net control knows what's going on. They know they have the token and they can make the next people talk next. Matt?
Yeah, just a comment. I think when we were initially discussing how the net control would initiate that person-to-person communication, I don't know if it's clear, but net control should contact the person you're trying to reach and make sure they're actually around before handing off to that
Right.
person-to-person.
Yeah.
So yeah, that should be very formal, the going to that and then back to the net organized communications.
Yep. I missed it. Any other questions? Or so net control is a third person. They're the invisible person that's listening to the channel citywide, organizing that channel for everybody. And the net control is necessary because they just make things move faster by having nobody in doubt of what's happening. If there's doubt about who should talk next, everything slows down.
And how is net control established and what happens before, we're organized?
That is a great question that we're going to simply skip over for this drill. There will be net control. In practice, if nobody else is, if you're first person on the channel and nobody else is there in net control, you can act as net control. We have a script for how to do that forget if it's in the radio operator guide yet, but you've already heard most of the job. By hearing a few nets, you'll know how to do it, or you can join on Monday night.
Pat, you had a question.
It was pretty similar. In a real event, will a ham radio operator be assigned to be the net control, or that's what you're kind of thinking? We don't have a definite answer on that. Okay.
It'll be a GMRS radio operator sitting somewhere, some hub somewhere, or at their house. But this is not something ACS will do for us. If we're talking on GMRS radio, it is up to GMRS radio operators to figure out how to talk effectively.
For this net, we will have a radio operator or a net control and probably even a backup. Let me talk about what repeater we'll use later. Let's finish up the net control topic. Any other questions on how the net works or how the message passing flow looks at the high level? Okay, I think we're ready to go to the screen of fancy words.
Okay. Fancy words.
Yeah. Okay. Break, we talked about, where I'm going to take a brief break. I'm going to lift up on the transmit. I'm going to let you catch up. It means I'm not done yet, or it means I've finished one section. Like I finished the title. I finished the body. I'm going to go on to the next section, just giving people a break to catch up. This is something different nets have different protocols. We're going to use this one for using break. The next break one, we can go ahead and delete from the exercise. The only reason it's really here is to explain to you why when you say breaker, you make people cry on the net. Breaker, and all those Hollywood things actually mean something, and it's really important. It's break. It means I have an extremely high priority and I need to stop the net because of me. And so you can understand why people saying breaker are confusing. The only example I've heard in the real world was kind of like this, where somebody just heard a message that wildfire was approaching their location and they needed some clarification. And yes, that was the right thing. They really needed it then. They got confirmation. And the method is just the same as anything else, where you say break, who you are, say you've got priority traffic, and then you listen for net control, who's there like attuned and for this purpose to clear up, get you the attention you need. So we're not going to do that during the drill. It's just educational of like why it's there. End is end of message. It's just saying that we've reached the end. And so end of message is there. Go ahead, that's the handoff saying, I've got my pencil, I'm caught up, we're good to go. If you're not ready, you don't have to go ahead. I say again, that's a question of what's the backspace. So I just said you're at 115 main. I say again, 125 main, 125 main is that way of correcting that you just made a mistake as you go. Out means I'm turning off my radio, I'm done for the day. So another Hollywoodism of over and out means please respond to me urgently, I'm turning off my radio now. There's a reason you never say those two together. So just go over. We don't need to say out in this drill except for the end of the drill. That's the only time we're going to say it. Over will say a lot because that's saying, I want you to reply. And as quickly as you can acknowledge, I'm ready to keep going. So I just say like, I've copied the main part of the body over. Matt says we're good. And then please fill in starting it as through that, just speeds it up so we don't have to repeat everything. And Roger, now you know means I've received. So some pro words, we're going to shrink it even more before it goes on the final version. This gives you context. Once we've done the drill, it's easy to see why they're all there. Any questions here or corrections you want to give? Because as I say, these words are things that some people will care a lot about. Okay.
Not seeing any hands.
Yeah.
So this is stuff I pulled out of your thing.
Yep.
So really slow it down.
Yep. And yeah, in our last drill, it was really quite cute where we had 5 hubs talking. Every single hub thought the other people were talking too fast. If they need you to speed up, they'll say it, but I bet that won't happen. And this is another one. When you get excited, you can go click high, and turn on and off the radio too fast for people to hear, truncating that valuable sentence and requiring people to ask for clarification. So finish talking, pause, release the transmit button, give them all that time to make sure that the message was heard. Okay, end of slideshow. Well, we hit all the high points that I wanted to talk about. We talked about there's going to be net control. We're going to pass messages and how to make sure we slow ourselves down and do that and hand back to net control. We talked about the ICS 213 form and the kind of the gotchas that we've run into in previous drills. And a bunch of us actually tested tuning to a ham radio repeater and switching back. So that was my punch list for radio questions today. Anybody have follow-ups or things they'd like to talk about?
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you want to use the phrase, this is an exercise in any context in this exercise, if you're passing content that could really upset somebody listening in on our frequencies?
Thank you. Yeah, all of the sample messages have that as the subject, but yes, absolutely. This is an exercise. Not the word drill because that's confusing to some people. This is an exercise. And absolutely, the more we will give out scripts in part to avoid people having to improvise and forgetting that. So excellent point. All right. And what was next on the agenda or?
Nope, that's all we're covering tonight. I will be sending out an agenda for our last drill prep meeting. It's a lot of odds and ends. It'll be the pre-staged messages, a little bit more about the radio stuff like that, when to tune in and exactly where to tune into. So a lot of final details will be passed next Monday, the 20th, at our Zoom call, 7 p.m. Everybody's welcome. Any questions, please keep shooting them to me. I'm hearing I'm hearing quite a bit from some hubs, but other hubs have been really quiet. So I don't have a good feel for where everybody is. I hope folks are doing those prep steps to get ready, so you're not scrambling at the last minute and you feel as confident as you can. Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
So I may have several GMRS radios at my hub during the June 1st drill, practice, exercise, whatever we're calling it. And I was toying with the idea of sending a couple people out on bikes that I know are available during that time. And I was kind of toying with the idea of sending them to a location, like to a nursing home in our area, and seeing if we could communicate over the GMRS radio. So do they have to all go through the net control? Some of them are personal GMRS radios, not necessarily our hub radios, but they've all been fiddled with, or whatever you guys call it, you know.
Programmed.
Program, sorry, yeah.
Great question. And for the drill, I think Ann and I are talking about having let people go away and they come back messages to practice. If
like
you
what you're talking about, Pat.
Like exactly what you're talking about. If you wanted to use the citywide repeater, so the repeater we're using for the drill, yes, you would need to ask net control for permission to talk. You can do that as an away messenger, but my suspicion is it's going to be kind of busy and they may not have time. They may be back at the hub by the time they have time to talk. The other thing you could do, and this is a real stretch goal, but you could use one of the low number GMRS frequencies or the simplex frequencies programmed in that aren't part of the repeater and try talking from point to point. If you have people that like radio and want to figure that out, great, but we didn't make that as a citywide requirement, since just getting away and coming back with a message is going to prove everything else working. Does that make sense as an outline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just as a follow to that, how do we know which ones aren't repeaters on the GMRS stuff?
Yeah. Even more complicated, which ones don't interfere with the repeaters.
Right.
I can help generate a little cue card that shows which ones overlap. But there's a bunch called SIMP, and you could use those simplex ones. They actually have a tone as well. Just so you know, if I am working on repeater 4, don't use the channel 345. If you follow that, you won't have overlap. And so for the drill, we'll set up a simplex one as well, just in case people want to practice. Probably simplex 1.
And
3, 4, and 5 are not repeater outputs. No.
Are they inputs or outputs? I always have to check. I have an Excel sheet to figure out which one you're stomping on.
I think all of the outputs are between 15 and 22 through the higher channels.
Yeah, they are, but the inputs the little handhelds are equally susceptible to inputs.
Okay. You mean the interstitial channels are overlapping?
If I am receiving on simplex next to somebody that's trying to work the repeater with these radios, we had problems.
Okay.
Yeah, so as far as the channels are concerned, there are 22 simplex channels, but the last 8 of those are shared with the repeater channels. So you want to avoid the last 8 channels unless you're using a repeater.
And
yeah, I think he was mentioning the middle channels, which are in between repeater inputs.
And given they are in between, and given the allowed drift in our GMRS cheap radios, they can actually overlap. We had that happen during hub drill where I used channel 3 and repeater 3. And even though they aren't the same frequency, we could hear each other and it was a big mess.
Okay.
so for us non-radio wonks.
For non-radio, we'll give you a channel if you want to experiment.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
will be safe. It'll be simplex 1. I can just say that now. That's going to be safe for this drill.
yeah. And so this would be what Pat's talking about is probably the volunteer coordinator talking to somebody out in the field on GMRS radio, not necessarily involving the radio operator. I think that's what you're talking about, Pat.
Exactly that.
Is that Pat? I'm looking at you
Yep.
to see if that's okay. So ideally you would send that volunteer out with a radio and you say, I want you to talk to me on channel 1. If that doesn't work, hop to channel 2. If that doesn't work, hop to channel 3. So you're kind of giving them a place to start and where to go if you can't hear me on channel 1.
Sorry,
Am
if I
I
can
right,
correct.
Miles? Yeah,
No.
go ahead.
No, that won't work because the
Okay.
problem is the person back at the hub doesn't know what they hop to. So if you want to spend the time rotating up and down the dial trying to figure out where your remote person is, you can do that. But really, this is why messengers are so wonderful. I mean, if they can go get the data and bring it back, that's 100% certain to work.
Go ahead, Pat.
We have a North Broadview hub and a South Broadview hub now, and we did a little playing around. Carleon was helping us. I mean, I was not actually doing this part. There were 2 radio people doing it, and they used simplex between the 2 hubs because we wanted to know whether we could just do that. And then I was expanding it, thinking, could we get to the closest shopping area and report back from there. That was my idea. But now I can see, unless you are using the net, people back at the hub will not know what channel you're using. So
If the volunteer coordinator, as they're sending
Yeah.
everybody out, says today we're using simplex 1 and we're all going to be on 1, then it works.
Yeah.
okay. All right.
What about a neighboring hub that's also using one?
This is why we tried to set up a bunch of simplex channels, because you might also want to talk to the neighboring hub on 1. And honestly, at that point, you start pulling in hams because there just aren't enough GMRS frequencies.
So it's possible that 2 hubs could use the same channel and it wouldn't be an issue. And it's also possible that 2 hubs could use the same simplex channel and it would be an issue. So kind of until we're there, you're not going to know where you overlap, where you're stepping on each other.
How about for this drill that we assign channels so that we can have success doing the transmissions and everything? You know what I mean? Let's eliminate that for this.
For the people that want to experiment, we can set that up.
Yeah, experiment using a simplex channel.
Yeah.
I have a question for Miles. Are the repeaters always on, or are they turned on and off by some controller?
The repeaters are always on. There
They
are
should all be
some
on.
there are some backup repeaters that are offline that in an emergency might be turned on, but all the ones we use are on by default.
Yeah. Also, there are a couple of repeaters that conflict with repeaters out in the mountains, but they use different tones to activate, and sometimes during our drills, those ones are turned off. But yeah, you might hear people talking on the same channel that can't seem to hear you. They're coming from a different repeater. So if that's the case, you should move to a different channel or something.
This is why we're going to have a backup frequency for our drill. These are good
Okay.
questions. Any more?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see any more hands.
Right on time then. Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Miles. Thanks, Pat. Matt. All right.
Yep. And
Bye
the
bye.
net is starting on channel 2 right now.
Oh yeah. Jump to channel 2 with your GMRS.
Yep. Thanks.